Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, your soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now. Hi, welcome back. Guess what? This is our 50th episode. Yes, 50. And I hope you've been enjoying listening to this podcast focused around soul evolution, self-mastery, and helping the soul to continue to evolve and to grow and to advance. Because we all have a soul, and our soul is here on purpose, whether we're aware of it or not. And to be more aware and more attuned and more joyful and engaged with your soul, wow, that's nice. And your soul is delighted. One of the things I thought I was going to do in this episode was briefly recap some of the things that I've talked about leading up to this 50th episode. And then give you some thoughts that I have about what's kind of the themes that I see that are taking place. So with that in mind, I first began talking about why I was doing this. So you can go back and listen to that in episode 1. And how I really felt the need that I wanted to share some perspectives and some thoughts and opinions. This really was to give you food for thought, to think in a different way, or to maybe entertain other thoughts as it relates to this whole direction that I've kind of moved in with looking at self-mastery, looking through the lens of the soul, the day-to-day experiences that we do have. What are the possible meanings to that? And what I began doing was laying the foundation. So those were some of the beginning episodes, laying the foundation, talking about attention informs reality, talking more about distractions that keep us off balance, and how we need to really be more balanced and focused, because the world will always have distractions and have things for us to look at other than ourselves, and to look internally within ourselves and find where that point of strength and power and wisdom and love exists within us, which I'll be talking a little bit more about in terms of those superpowers and what are some of those superpowers, which I'm only going to talk about 3 today, but I will talk about others in the future as well. And then also we talked about this whole focus around assumptions and how assumptions can get in our way. And I also talked about we don't know what we don't know. And so that's where the soul comes in, because one of those things we don't always know about is our soul, and thinking that we even have a soul, which I kind of coined the term soul is the substance of your, with a U-R, life, the substance of your life, the trueness, the realness, the essence of who you really are. Outside of which we talked about too, about the ego persona. And understanding that the ego persona is kind of this fabricated sense of self that we've kind of developed for protection, and we developed because of societal norms and what the expectations are of us. And so we conform to those things that may be in alignment with our soul and direction that we need to move in. And sometimes it's outside of that alignment of what our soul is looking for and needing from us. And that's why sometimes we do come and experience more depression or sadness or feeling out of sorts or anxious. It's because those are all qualities that are out of alignment with our soul and our soul quest and direction. And sometimes life experiences do bruise us. Those experiences hurt us that we have. And so that sometimes gets in the way of understanding our soul and move us into the ego persona and developing defenses, is what I'll call them, mechanisms to protect ourselves. I get it. We also talked about in the laying of the foundation 5 judgments that can impact us, and understanding those judgments becomes helpful. Not to say an exhaustive list there, the 5, but I thought they were 5 of the significant ones that we needed to be aware of. And I think that was in episode 12 that you can go back and listen to if you so choose. And then I talked about, as one of those episodes in laying the foundation, about the 4 soul states, and understand that the soul does have states of evolution and growth and cycling in and out that we need to be aware of. And that was related to being asleep, that our soul can really pretty much be asleep, and I talked about what that meant, and the dozing type of soul, and the partially awake, and the engaged ascending soul, which we're all striving towards, this last component or stage or aspect of what the soul is needing, and how we want to tap into that. And that laid some of the foundation, along with other things about. And then we went into talking about this whole area of barriers and roadblocks to soul progress. And with those barriers and roadblocks to our soul's progress, I was really focusing on those things that basically get in our way. That we are subtly or more overtly, that we may kind of know that is not right, but not quite understand some of the behind the scenes of why it may not be right or accurate for our soul and our soul evolution. Some of those that I was reflecting on and thinking about and giving my perspective on was like the creeping condemnation and the acquired anger and the weary warrior. And I did 3 parts of that weary warrior. The worry that goes on for us, that does act as a barrier to our own evolutionary growth and advancement. Then I also talked about the constant complaining that happens that can act as a barrier to our soul, and the sticky stubbornness and deflating discouragement and the grumpy grudges and the revolving resentments and the awkward arrogance and the persistent procrastination and the sinking sarcasm was one of the last ones that I spoke on, which you can all hear about, and how they have an impact on our soul and our soul's direction and movement. And when I was working on those and thinking about them, it was kind of a creative flow that happened when I was thinking about the psychology of people, the psychology of mood states, and also the psychology of misbeliefs that we do have, and how do they impact the soul and the soul advancement. And sometimes, as I said earlier, it can be really subtle how they have that impact. Sometimes it's very much in our face, and we realize it by what a person shared with us or said to us. What we're trying to do is be more alert and aware where they're showing up. Where do I notice the sinking sarcasm happening? Am I noticing happening when I get irritated and frustrated by what someone did to me at work or at home or in my home life? Do I get frustrated then, and then I make a sarcastic comment, and then there's a part of me that knows, maybe I shouldn't have said that. That was a little bit too biting of what I said. So that sinking sarcasm happens, but it's not only happening to us and our outer awareness is going on, but in our inner core of who we are, our soul essence, it has an impact upon us too. It's like putting that weight on us, putting that density, which I've talked about in episodes, on us, and being aware of the fact that the soul is like an eagle. It can't fly if its wings are clipped through density, through sarcasm, through procrastination, through complaining. And these are all the things that we want to clean up. We want to do less of. We may not be entirely be done away with, but we can surely work on doing less of these qualities. I'm going to be talking about other qualities as well as we move forward after the 50th episode here. But I wanted to just give some thoughts to you about these qualities and laying of the foundation that I've already talked about. And they have a common theme, these barriers and roadblocks to soul progress. And I kind of mentioned it and hinted at it a little bit before. And one of the common themes so far is they're pushing you to think about emotional self-mastery. These are all elements. The ones that I just mentioned are elements of emotionally being out of sorts, out of alignment, out of attunement to who we really are. They are mask. They mask who we are. And we take it as if it's us. This is who we are. This mask that we show of worrying about something. Worrying about what the future will hold, or worrying about whether they're going to get into that school or college, or worrying about whether we're going to get that promotion at work, or worrying about, are my kids going to love me? I mean, these are, incessant things that can go on that takes our energy away from the true essence of who we really are, the true essence of our soul, which is the substance, the true substance of our life. One of the things is with this emotional mastery that these barriers and roadblocks are calling for. The first thing I was trying to help you to do is to build awareness. And being a greater sense of awareness, that self-awareness, that you can be able to see when you're slipping and you've moved into a particular state or a barrier or roadblock, that you realize, I'm trying to kind of break myself of that. I'm trying to do less of that. But we first have to be aware before we can be able to make any type of shifts that we may want. But the other thing is, now that we are aware, we also have to be more intentional. This intentionality to be different. The intentionality to say no to this and yes to this. Yes to the liberation of my soul, and yes to feeling lighter and better in my interactions with individuals, feeling cleaner in my conversations that I'm giving or having with other individuals. And so that becomes really helpful for the soul when we're getting more intentional about that. Because then we have the motivation and we'll start to develop the energy to act differently, to stop ourselves, to say, no, I'm not doing that this time. I'm not going to slip on that banana peel this time. Instead, I'm going to do this. So it uses your intentionality with the actions being pre-planned about how you want to do something different in the next time that it comes up. We may not always catch ourselves when it's actually happening, but right after we realize we are aware of it. So even then, we can make that correction, because that's what the soul wants. It wants us to be more intentional in making the corrections when we're aware of it, as opposed to a decade down the road when we realize, oh, wow, I've been doing that, so I guess I'm going to continue to do it. No, that's not really what you have to be saddled with, I guess is the word. That we have an ability to make changes in our lives regardless of how often, in terms of the frequency or the duration of whatever has occurred to us. It may have been occurring to us for several decades. You may now be in your 40s or 50s or 60s, or it may have been happening, to you, you're more aware of it in your 20s. Wherever we're aware of it and we start making changes, that allows us to make progress and continue to work towards being our best self, because we're changing those behaviors that get us stuck, that are the barriers as we've talked about, because ultimately the goal is soul liberation. Liberating the soul from this kind of layers of stuff that are weighing us down, moving us away from being on autopilot, that we're unconscious of to these behaviors, but we're now moving out of the autopilot into looking at there is a motive for change. Their motivation for my change is when I start not gauging in some of these barriers and roadblocks of like sticky stubbornness or constant complaining, when I become more intentional about saying, I don't want to do that anymore. And I want to be able to look at something, look at what it is that needs to happen differently, communicate that in a positive way, but not continue to complain about it. That doesn't help us. It doesn't help anyone. But we need to find other creative ways to share our thoughts and ideas that is liberating to our soul. And there's usually 3 aspects that move us into wanting to change about things. That's talked about in psychology. And yes, there are plenty others, but I'm just going to talk about 3 changes that we need to be aware of as it relates to those walking a spiritual path. And one is pain. When we feel pain, we're more willing to make changes. And so use the pain in a way that you realize, and realize it may be a pain in your heart or pain in your gut, or not keeping you up at night and you become sleepless because you said or you did something that was not in honoring of the essence of who you are and your values and what's important to you. And so we can use that pain as to say, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to make a different choice when this situation comes up upon me. Because if you notice in your life, things happen to you again, and again. Different phase, different circumstance, different situation maybe, but the theme is still the same, trying to teach us something, trying to help us to look at something that we haven't looked at before that needs to be looked at. And the universe has a way of doing that for us. The other is that we truly want something better in our life. We want to be a better person. And if we're on that goal or that quest to be our best self, then why don't we make changes when we see that they need to be made? Why don't we be humble enough to be able to say, what, that didn't come out right, or I didn't say that right. I'm going to, I want to work on that a little bit and be more clear with you, whoever you're talking with. Or, you know what, I own it. Yes, and I will make the corrections where it needs to be done and then move on from that and not feel the need to have to defend yourself or to justify yourself. And instead, see it for what it is, make the change, keep moving. And then the third one that we are having to do if we're wanting to move towards motivation for change is being purposeful with your soul and mind. You're being purposeful because you want to continue to evolve and grow. You're observing, you're seeing yourself. I don't mean you have to be like a microscope and you have to be observing everything going on like under a microscope. But you're just being attuned to the fact that I want to make sure that I'm being purposeful in making the changes that I want to keep my soul awake, to keep my soul moving from this, dozing or partial awake into more of an engaged and ascending, moving forward. I'm ascending daily. I'm moving up to the next rung on the ladder of my own evolutionary growth and advancement. So that purposefulness to your soul actually engenders a graciousness, a goodness with your soul. And you feel more attuned. You feel more connected. You feel more grounded because of that purposefulness. And when you're doing that, that means you're automatically being attuned to some of the roadblocks that I've talked about and some of the ones I will talk about in the future. But you also may be things that I haven't talked about and that need to make subtle shifts and changes in, and you're willing to do it. And you see it as fun, as an activity of engagement that allows you to continue to gain mastery over it, gaining emotional mastery, gaining that self-emotional mastery in the situation. When we're doing those things, moving away from autopilot, being aware of what the motivation for change that may move you to want to do something different, identifying any particular roadblocks or barriers that are going on in your life and just taking one at a time. You don't have to do it. It's like you don't have to swallow the whole whale. You just have to take bite-sized pieces and keep things moving. Then that allows us to have a greater focus then, truly, on being our best self. Keenly aware of when you're not. And that is powerful in itself. That is moving us into a greater anchoring in the immensity of who we truly are. And with that immensity of truly who we really are, I would like to share 3 superpowers. I've talked about one already, and I'll share that in a minute. But when we're on this spiritual path, on this quest, in this direction, and we're excited by what we're learning about ourselves, we're excited by we're feeling more connected, more grounded in ourselves, then these superpowers can help us even more. They can help us with the barriers I've talked about, and the roadblocks I already talked about, and we'll talk about in the future. That can help us to continue to be on a firm foundation related to our own soul growth and evolution. So the first one is related to our soul that came from God and it wants to return to God in its soul evolution, in its path, and how in part the superpower, which I've talked about in the previous episode, is discernment. The soul is working on, through our awareness, through our experiences, discernment. Where we need to put our attention, what we need to do, and how we need to do it. Because we're in listening grace to our soul and our inner Christic nature, the Christ-like qualities that exist within us, as I talked about before. Because discernment builds wisdom. And wisdom is wise dominion. Taking wise dominion over situations. And sometimes we have to ask for a greater attunement to that discernment. Lord, mighty I am presence, Christ of me, Buddha of me, help me to learn and teach me about discernment, the superpower of discernment, so I can see clearly what to take in that Y in the road, whether to the right or to the left, or do something else. It's a superpower of discernment, which gains us greater wisdom. Start asking for it and start looking to discern between what is the higher way and what is the lower way in a decision that's being made that I need to make in my life. And if we're in prayer or we're in giving ourselves reflective time, or quiet time, being still to that light and love, being still in ourselves, and asking the question, we start to gain and garner a greater degree of this quality of discernment. Now, the next superpower that you can use to help with the barriers, to help with the life experiences that you're going through, is first and foremost, being aware of the fact that the soul craves our attention and nurturance. And the more that we can be in attunement with our soul awareness, that we can be in attunement with knowing that our soul wants attention and nurturing of kindness, of love and regard, of positivity to our soul, of having a conversation which you would like have with a best friend. You have it with your soul. This is really the superpower of love. And love, there's human love, and then there is divine love. And I'm not saying that human love you don't need. We do want that, but we want it through kind of a different lens. We want it through the heart quality lens, or through what I like to share as heartfeltness. The heartfeltness that is tied into the soul's awareness of itself, being greater than itself, being tied back into what we talked about in terms of that God source, the I am presence, the Atman. So one of the things about love I was thinking and meditating on, I think it's in Corinthians. So God took away the net from one's heart so that you could have clarity and clearer vision and clearer understanding. And so what we have to do is sometimes this humanness, defines love in a particular way, but it's so much more than that. So we have to ask God to take that net off our heart and expand it to the gracious qualities of what love is. And so I think there's like 1,000 qualities of love and shades and variations of love that we can be able to start to reflect on, start to think about, start to even Google about, and understand what is love and how can I love this particular situation that I find myself in. And with the particular barriers, how can love help to dissolve those barriers and allowing me to see things from a different perspective? Taking time to be able to say, okay, that was old. That's the old way in which I'm looking at this. What is the loving way? Can I look at this? What is the right way? But it doesn't mean that you're not being discerning. As I said earlier, like using that other superpower. And it does mean that you're not moving into anger or you're not moving into hate, which is not the quality of walking a spiritual path. We don't want to hate anyone or anything. We want to forgive. We want to have the correction to take place, and we want to move on. So the other quality that I want to talk about, which the soul needs guideposts, needs markers that we're headed in the right direction. And it is this is through understanding the will of God, the I am presence, the Atman, the universal source, understanding what is the will of God in this particular situation that I find myself in. And you hear me going back to the qualities of quietness, of stillness, of listening to what your inner promptings, your intuition, which is that soul quality, will share with you. And I'll talk about that in future episodes as well. But this guidepost is so important to the soul, and that's why I've been talking about these qualities of what are the barriers and roadblocks to soul progress, because it allows you to understand a better understanding that when you're in quicksand and when you're on solid ground. And we need to know we don't want to be in quicksand. We don't want to be sinking from our experiences or emotional natures or what's going on with us in any particular day. But we want to be on solid ground, and we want to be walking in an elevated way that allows the soul to move into being fully engaged and ascending each and every day, doing our best, being better and better and better. That is what the soul is looking for and wants. I'll talk more about these superpowers in future episodes as well. But for now, give it some thought. What do you think? And I'm so happy that this is the 50th episode, and I have so much more to say. This was an overview I wanted to give of some of the things we've talked about and understanding where these roadblocks and barriers and why they're important to soul evolution. And then also just talk about that emotional self-mastery that is taking place. And I will talk more about how it's so important in future episodes in terms of this emotional self-mastery, along with other points of mastery that will help us to continue to blossom and help our soul to continue to evolve and grow. Look forward to your continued involvement in these episodes. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.